Compass Mining is your trusted partner in Bitcoin mining. Whether you're investing in one machine or thousands, our customizable solutions are tailored to meet your needs. We are your experts in Bitcoin mining, offering a platform where individuals and businesses can purchase hardware, host machines, and access a range of ancillary Bitcoin mining services. We also specialize in large-scale site development and data center operations. Discover more at compassmining.io and see how we can power your success today.
Hey miners, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. In today's episode, Anthony Power and I are going to be reviewing Hive's recently announced Q3 earnings. In addition to that, we're going to be taking a look at Bitdeer's production for the month of January, which was just released this morning. A lot to go through. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. Anthony loves it. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join. Let us know in the comment section below if you're currently holding shares of either Hive or Bitdeer and your outlook for these stocks in 2025. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so here we go. Wednesday morning, we're getting into earnings season here. Hive has just come out with Q3 results. We're going to be analyzing those in today's podcast. Anthony, I know you've brought along some of your great comparative tables. We're going to be looking at their earnings compared to CleanSpark, which are the first two out of the gate. We also have IREN coming out after the bell. Tonight, we're going to be having the co-CEO, co-founder Daniel Roberts on the program tomorrow. That's going to be a big interview. And then, of course, Bitdeer Technologies just came out with their January production. So no shortage of news, as we say in the Bitcoin mining space. Anthony, before we get into that, though, Bitcoin price, very interesting price movement this morning in response to some of the inflation data. I'll let you get into that. Nice recovery. Miners now generally in the green with Bitcoin trading up close to $97,500.
Yeah, the news came out earlier on just before market open, and the inflation figures weren't as good as expected. And we saw not just Bitcoin price, but literally all the indices were down at the start at market opening. I think around about 1 to 1.5%, the three big indexes in the US. And Bitcoin price yet drops as low as 94,000 very, very quickly, literally in about space of about 10 minutes. And then the recovery started slowly, as we've seen before, an overstretch in terms of the drop and then the pullback. And then, sort of a couple of hours into the market, we've seen the Bitcoin price start to rally now, and it's rallied higher than it was at the opening. So not sure I can work out all the whys and the wherefores, but I'll take that. In terms of the mining stocks, that they've also had a bit of a yo-yo day as well. So they went down very, very quickly. All the mining stocks were red as soon as the Bitcoin price in pre-market went down. But we're seeing signs of green shoots coming through now. Quite a few of the miners have turned green. And obviously it'll all be dependent on when the Bitcoin price finishes at the end of the day as to where the mining stocks will finish. They seem to be really coupled to the Bitcoin price at the moment.
They certainly do. Interesting always to hear these headlines, Anthony. As we know, Bitcoin by nature is deflationary. Realistically, a higher inflation rate should be bullish for Bitcoin. But as you say, we see that big overreaction, that knee-jerk ditch-to-ditch response. And I know I took advantage of that and was buying some shares this morning. Now, speaking of shares, we've got companies reporting earnings. Interestingly enough, Anthony, if you're looking for these press releases, these earnings reports, unfortunately, Yahoo still has this ban going on Bitcoin or crypto-related companies. Now, BTCS is one of our clients on the McNallie Money side of things. They were on the program just recently. They've started putting some work together, almost starting a grassroots coalition, so to speak, to try and bring some attention to this imbalance. You can imagine if you're a smaller company, mid-sized company, Yahoo Finance is your go-to for distribution for news. And if you're blocking earnings reports, very difficult to get word out to the market. What do you make of this, Anthony, as we're seeing so many positive moves in the Bitcoin landscape, yet this one seems to be going the other way?
Yeah, I can't wait. I mean, this isn't the first time we've heard this either. We've heard from another number of miners who said that their data has not been shown readily on Yahoo Finance. And you think with the inauguration of President Trump and the bullishness of the Republican Party towards Bitcoin, that they might have changed their attitudes. But this again is it's more and more information about Bitcoin news being suppressed by Yahoo Finance. I just find it challenging to understand why. But maybe if we get the message out and that message gets sent out further and further, a lot of people in the space, maybe we can raise the attention to this as to a lot of people do source that type of news, and if it's not Yahoo Finance, I'm sure a competitor to Yahoo Finance will pick up the mantle and carry it forward.
They certainly will. And speaking of picking up the mantle, we've actually added a news section for each of the individual miners on our Power Mining Analysis website. So our web team just got this up and working last week, Anthony. You can go into each and every one of the specific individual miner pages, and you'll actually have a news feed there with all of the latest press releases. So a great alternative, at least until Yahoo sorts out that restriction. Now, we just mentioned Hive. We wanted to get into earnings here. You've brought some of these great comparative tables. We also pulled some slides from their investor presentation that went along with this press release. So overall, Anthony, as we expected, this quarter favorable for Hive, but the tail of the tape really is this expansion in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, we had Aidan and Frank on the podcast last week, and they just announced the news about the purchase of the site from Bitfarms, 200 megawatt site there, another 13 exahash potentially coming from that site, and coming from that site this year. So, if you think about Hive at the moment, they operate with about 6 exahash. They've got these 2 big facilities in Paraguay coming online in the next 8 months. That will drive the hash rate to 25 exahash. So, that's a significant increase. That's similar to the sort of increase we saw from IREN last year, and they achieved it last year. The challenge now will be for Hive to achieve their target. We spent a lot of time looking at sort of 5 miners last year who had big growth targets. We had Bitfarms, we had IREN, we had CleanSpark, Core Scientific, and Riot Platforms to see who was going to get the targets. And we felt, a couple would do it and a couple would be close to doing it, or might have problems depending on how they were accessing one site versus maybe 10, 11 different sites. This is a big jump for Hive Digital. They've grown their hash rate sort of organically over the last few years. Go back to 2021, they were effectively one of the biggest miners in the space. 2021 revenues, none of these mining companies earned more revenue than Hive Digital. They outperformed everybody. And in terms of operational performance, over the last 4 years, they've been in the top 2 along with Bitfarms. But revenues in 2021 and 2022, they were earning more than Riot and Marathon Digital. So, but they didn't, being a Canadian company, we've spoken with Aidan about this and Frank, and being a Canadian company, didn't have access to the finances as well as some of the US miners have done, like CleanSpark, like Riot, like Marathon, used that their position on the Nasdaq, being an American company, raises more capital, more growth. Hive have had to do it a little bit more organically, plus the fact, if you remember, Hive were an Ethereum miner, so they went down the GPU route and then started to focus on Bitcoin when it started to be said that Ethereum mining, there was an end game to this, and once the fork had happened back in September 2022, that would be the end of Ethereum mining from a revenue point of view, and so they were left with a significant amount of GPUs and wondering what to do with those at the time. Now they're moving into the HPC space, and they're achieving, according to their earnings now, they're at the 10 million annualized revenue. They've sort of continued to grow the Bitcoin mining business a bit more slowly than maybe some of the shareholders were expecting. But this growth this year, this is a big change for Hive. It looks like a different direction, and so when you look at their results for the quarter, they were okay. They weren't outstanding results, but they were good. They were good results. They were positive. So, they achieved a net income of about $1.3 million. Total revenue, $29.2 million. So that's the two businesses. 91.3% of that revenue was about Bitcoin mining, and the other 1.8%, which represented about 2.5 million of that, was HPC revenues. And the HPC revenues in Q1 are expected to increase from 10 million annualized to 15 million. In Q2, that will go to 20, and they have a target by the end of the year to get to 100 million annualized revenue in HPC. So that's a big, big growth in HPC. At the same time, they're growing this Bitcoin mining business as well from 6 exahash, and we'll see hash rate come on in Q1, Q2, and Q3. And by the end of Q3, we're expected to see 25 exahash. And that puts them then in the sort of like in the top tier with the likes of IREN, CleanSpark, Marathon, and Riot. From a hash rate perspective, they'll have overtaken quite a few miners on the way into that position there. But, that's the plan, and we'll see how the plan works out.
Yeah, Anthony, just an incredible amount of growth. Now, as you list these numbers, essentially a 4x increase in hash rate, a 10x increase in HPC. Is that feasible within a single calendar year?
Well, it can be done. We saw IREN do it, a big increase last year. They were at 6 exahash at the beginning of the year. They got to 31 by the end of the year. So they increased 25. Yes, it was all pretty much on one site, the growth at Childress. So it's easy to manage. They can just bring people into the one site, bring more people in as they need it, and they achieve that target. But we also saw the likes of Bitfarms, who had a 21 exahash target by the end of the year and got to 12. They were 9 exahash short. Hive have got a significant target this year and a significant target in HPC. And so the spotlight will certainly be on those two businesses as they grow. Now, they've been very, very clear with regards to the Bitcoin mining. 25 is their target for the end of September. I think the HPC, we'd all like them to get 100 million annualized. That will depend on a number of factors. But the HP for the Bitcoin mining, that's categoric there. They've purchased the site. They're finishing off the sites. Now, the sites were already being built by Bitfarms, and the one that they had themselves was getting closer towards energization, which will happen early in 2025. So, they just need the momentum now to keep those sites up there. They really do need that 25 by the end of Q3 because the market doesn't like it when miners don't achieve targets. So the focus will be on them. Aidan and Frank are very positive. They came on the podcast. They've been down to the site a few times now. They've got great relationships with the local authorities down there. And they're doing some good things for being social responsible in those areas to help the local residents as well. I think one of the things they're doing down there is providing all the electricity for the local schools, which is a great thing to do, and hopefully that ensures that they keep their energy contracts in place at an affordable price for them because they need this. One of the things that came out of their earnings was the fact that it looks like the energy prices they're paying are significantly higher than certainly from the likes of CleanSpark, because we've already got now two miners effectively where we can compare. And if I just look at the income statement for both companies and look at it from a percentage point of view, so if we look at the gross margin. And when I say gross margin, I mean total revenues less the electricity cost. The gross margin for CleanSpark was 56.7%. The gross margin for Hive was 20.7%. So we know that Hive operates in Canada and Sweden at the moment. They recently stopped their business in Iceland. So they're operating in those two jurisdictions there. And I don't think they've been getting, as good of rates of power costs as other miners, and we'll see that as other miners start releasing their numbers. I mean, tonight will be a prime example when IREN release their results tonight. Now, bear in mind, IREN have been quoting, 3 cents a kilowatt hour. If I look at the revenues for Hive and look at the gross margin there, that would suggest probably closer to 7 to 7.5 cents a kilowatt hour if you look at a blended rate that they've paid over that period. Because CleanSpark came out and categorically said they paid 4.6 and they've achieved 56% as a percentage of the revenue. And revenues are fairly, Bitcoin is Bitcoin. This is the actual percentage against each Bitcoin. So, but then when we look at the other costs from the income statement, this is where Hive come into their own, because we know from the G&A costs, they don't go out there and spend their money on things unnecessarily. They manage their G&A costs very well, keep them controlled. They're quite low. So in terms of the G&A costs as a percentage, I also produce this cost to mine a Bitcoin. When we consider the operating cost for these companies and break it down into a Bitcoin, so how much of each expenditure is part of that Bitcoin cost, we can see now that CleanSpark, for every Bitcoin they produced in the last 3 months, they were spending $18,658 on things like G&A costs, payroll, professional fees, dividends, all those cash costs that they incurred. With Hive, they were only paying 14,000. So G&A is an area that they do keep really low. But to be honest with you, they have to keep that area really low because of the energy costs that they've been achieving. And if you think about Sweden, there was some issues there with additional taxation coming in against companies with data centers. So they've had to pay the price for some of those areas there. We know they've got some hedging in place, and I believe some of the gains that they received during the period were effectively probably energy gains for some of the hedging that they'd done. So they did benefit in other areas potentially. I need to look more into the detail about that. When it comes to sort of like the percentage to cost to mine a Bitcoin, we looked at CleanSpark. Their total cost per Bitcoin, all cash cost, was 65.67%. Total cost for Hive was 95.91. So they were, positive. It was green, but it doesn't leave a lot of margin there in terms of profit. Now, if you think about the Bitcoin revenue price for the last 3 months, it was around about 83,000 for these companies. We've just talked today about where the Bitcoin price is now. It's at 97. It was at 109,000 back in January. So this next quarter is going to be higher in terms of revenues than it was in the previous quarter. So if these companies are keeping their other costs and their energy costs, on a par with what they did in the last quarter, you'll see the margins increase quite significantly for both companies. The bellwether will be tonight when IREN release their results, because IREN don't have a HODL, so they're not going to benefit from any FASB rules. Hive haven't benefited from FASB rules either. CleanSpark certainly benefited from FASB rules. Hence, they came out with, I think it was like 246 million net income when they only actually achieved 170 million in revenue. So, they really benefit from the increased price in Bitcoin. IREN won't have that tonight. So it'll be interesting to see where IREN comes in, especially with their low energy costs and the best fleet efficiency. They've got the two best things going for them. Their energy price is 40% lower than CleanSpark, and their fleet efficiency during that last quarter was probably 15 to 20% better. So we should see margins really, really good for IREN tonight. So we'll be all over those figures when they come through. And great, we've got Dan on the podcast tomorrow just to go through those as well. So overall, the figures weren't as good as CleanSpark's, but they're still green. We want to see green figures. Hive come out with green figures. Their adjusted EBITDA came in at 17.8 million. So again, that's a positive position to be in. That just takes account of any of the one-offs that happen or occur each month there. In terms of depreciation, 18.8 million. Stock compensation, probably a little bit higher than I expected. It came in at 3.5 million. That represents about 12% of revenues. And we did some analysis before on some of the big tech companies, the likes of the Apples and the Microsoft, the Amazons. I think theirs was more at 7%. So, maybe a little high, but I mean, bear in mind, Hive's, at the moment, the revenues where they are now, the revenues will start to increase this year. So maybe that percentage obviously then will reduce as we go through.
Compass Mining makes Bitcoin mining accessible to everyone. Start mining in as little as 48 hours with our turnkey hardware, online and mining directly to your Bitcoin wallet within 2 business days. Find out more at compassmining.io and get started now.
And so just going through the balance sheet now, again, looking at the current ratio, what their assets over the current assets over the next 12 months versus current liabilities over the next 12 months. They've got 10.4 times as much current assets as liabilities, so no problems paying the bills for the foreseeable future. In terms of net assets, $434 million. Their market capitalization, as at this morning, was 428. So effectively, for every dollar at the moment you're investing in Hive, you're getting more than $1 in assets. Now, we looked at CleanSpark, and effectively for every dollar in CleanSpark, you're getting about 70 cents in assets. So this, again, it goes to that undervaluation that Hive has compared to some of the other miners. When we look at their HODL is valued earlier today at 271.8 million. They had cash and cash equivalents of 9.8 million. So the enterprise value was 172 million. And that gives you, then you start looking at what does that look like in terms of cost per exahash. Well, we look at the current fleet that came out at $28 million per exahash. That's compared to 56 for CleanSpark. But when you look at the future hash rate, if they get to that 25 by September, that takes it down to 6.9 million per exahash. And so, that's, again, it's another metric to show the undervaluation of the company. Now, the argument will be is we want to see profitability as well. So that's another metric. So I always say on this channel here, when you're looking at metrics, don't take one metric in isolation. There's a couple of metrics there on valuation that show that Hive are undervalued, but equally you've got to look at profitability, operational. We know that Hive are, them and Bitfarms lead the way. So, but you want to be looking at, 10, 12 different metrics to make sure that you've covered all the bases before you make any decisions to ever invest in any of the mining companies. But as I say, overall, green numbers, and that's what we want to see.
Most definitely, and appreciate you putting that together. Even just listening for myself, Anthony, very interesting to see a trained accountant go through these numbers, comparing, contrasting, and like you say, IREN tonight going to be a great indication of what's to come. Optimized fleet, optimized energy pricing, and of course selling daily for their Bitcoin. Now, Bitdeer is another one. We get a lot of questions about this one, Anthony. You talk about using multiple metrics or looking at different sides of the business. You look at Bitdeer's production, 126 Bitcoin. They have a HODL in the neighborhood of $74 million. They've just started building that. Fleet efficiency above 30 joules per terahash. So this one, to the untrained eye, maybe a bit of a head scratcher or question mark when you look at the market cap compared to a Riot or a CleanSpark. But when you start to open the hood at Bitdeer, there's so much more going on under the hood of this company.
Yeah, they do far more than the Bitcoin mine. They do cloud hash rate, they do hosting management services, they're producing their own miners. And actually, we're starting to see those miners coming to their facilities now. So there's already been a number of miners plugged in. There's a number of miners been delivered or waiting to be plugged in the next week. And then the bulk of that early, so they were looking to bring in 3.7 exahash of miners from the Seal Miner A2, and they're due to be energized probably late February, early March. That whole 3.7 exahash, that'll take them over 11 exahash. So this update is for the end of January, and you're quite right. 126 Bitcoin hash rate for that period was 8.7 exahash, and in terms of Bitcoin sold, I've got them down as not selling any Bitcoin because what they've started to do now is they've started to hodl. And we go back a year ago, we had this sort of half the miners were hodling, half the miners weren't hodling, and now we look at the miners. I think there's now just literally 3 miners that don't hodl, and that's Soluna, TeraWulf, and IREN. Core Scientific hodl now, Bitdeer hodl now, and so you're seeing this move across to that strategy. We're in a place now where adoption of Bitcoin is far greater than it was a year ago in terms of who's buying Bitcoin, the ETFs, there's companies out there putting the balance sheets, there's pension funds buying it. Me and you have bought a little bit this year as well. And so, not that that's going to change the price of fish, but there's more adoption out there. And so, a lot of these miners are thinking that, if half these analysts are right and the price goes to, 150, 200,000 in 2025, maybe hodling some of their production is going to put them in a better position. And we looked at the CleanSpark numbers. They had a benefit of around about 260 million in fair value of Bitcoin over that 3-month period. And they might get another significant jump in this quarter if Bitcoin rallies by the end of March. I think greater than 93,000. There'll be another increase in the unrealized gain. So, Bitdeer felt hodling is going to be their way. Now, obviously, when you're hodling Bitcoin, you've got to remember how you're going to pay the bills. So you've got to then start thinking, are they using the ATM? Are they using debt to pay the bills? Because they're not selling the Bitcoin now. So, this is a big operation, Bitdeer, that in terms of, we just talked about Hive revenue there. When Bitdeer bring their numbers out for the quarter, that, they'll be sort of, not that far behind the likes of CleanSpark and IREN. They've got many businesses bringing in lots of different types of revenue. So, that they need a substantial amount of money. So now it may be that some of these other operating businesses are supporting the Bitcoin, the self-mining, enabling them to hodl. So that could be one of the things there. Think about the fact that if they're producing their own mining machines, how much is that saving them having to go to one of the big suppliers like Bitmain or MicroBT? They're actually, producing their own, so they'll cut out a lot of the costs there. So I think, really, really, really good strategy. In terms of other updates from them today, as I said, the production of the sea miner remains on track, and the mass production of the 3.7 axis is expected to be completed early March. And then SealMiner A2 is set for October 2025. Now, that's been put back by a month because there was I don't know if you're aware, Bryce, there was an earthquake in Taiwan, which was like a 6.7 on the Richter scale, and that's put back production by a month. But they do remain on course for 7 exahash allocated for external sales starting in March. So remember, they were producing 35 exahash, of which 7 of that was going to be for sales for orders they'd already received throughout 2024. So those will happen from the end of March. We know that the SealMiner A3 and A4, they're continuing to advance those developments there. And I think the SealMiner A3, we'll start to hear more about that as we get through 2025. That's got if that comes out, that could have the lowest or the greatest efficiency of all the mining machines on the market at the moment. I think they're aiming for close to 10 joules a terahash. That would beat anything that's out there on the market at the moment. But bear in mind, other suppliers and manufacturers are looking to increase their efficiency in their machines. So Bitmain won't sit down and let another supplier come in with a superior model. They'll be going out all hands on deck to try and keep up and make sure they bring out a suitable model themselves. In terms of their AI and hosting, they've experienced a drop in the utilization, about 60%, due to an increased focus on their R&D. And so, that's come down a little bit there. We'll monitor that again in February. Hosting service actually expanded with another 2,000 additional client hosting machines and a 0.5 exahash increase in hash rate as customers upgraded their machines to more efficient rigs. And if we look at infrastructure expansion, there's progress continued across multiple sites, including a 40 megawatt expansion in Norway, a 100 megawatt hydro cooling conversion in Texas, and ongoing negotiations for a 300 megawatt project in Ohio. The 500 megawatt Bhutan project remains on schedule, and Bitdeer's 101 megawatt gas-fired power plant and data center in Alberta is due, towards the end of 2026. So that's a little bit further in the distance there. In terms of Financing, they recently secured a 17 million supply chain financing facility with a 10.2 interest rate, and the company aims to be enhanced vertical integration with its Alberta acquisition, leveraging its own power generation, proprietary machines, and grid participation for improved efficiency and cost control. So that'll be the first miner to be effectively fully vertically integrated, have their own power, their own machines, their own facilities, running everything themselves. That's as good as it gets.
It certainly is. And that one's in Alberta, my home province. So I can't wait to get that tour or experience when that facility is online. Now, I didn't know about the earthquake, Anthony. Unfortunately, that's horrible news. And it brings up a good point that we talked about on the Compass Mining podcast. Things like Bitcoin, obviously, cloud hash rate, HPC, AI, a lot of these are intangible, but oftentimes we forget in this space that everything relies on physical equipment, physical infrastructure, facilities, R&D teams. So definitely things like an earthquake, a fire, a drought, a flood, even the temperatures we've seen in January can have a big impact on these companies' operations. So always important to remember the physical component of all this infrastructure as well. Now, we talked about the hodl versus no hodl. We've seen Bitdeer initiate a hodl. You mentioned TeraWulf as one that is continuing to sell. We actually reached out to them for a monthly production report as well, Anthony. They are no longer providing those as of January 2025. So again, continuing to push down that HPC path or focus.
Yeah, absolutely. And it didn't come as a total surprise. They've been talking up the HPC for quite a while now. They've got the contract, and it's a contract where they can probably expand that contract in the same way that Core Scientific did. So it looks like they're fully focused. They've still got a significant fleet there at the Lake Mariner site there, getting close to 10 exahash. So it would have been nice to sort of like keep the data coming through, but that's their decision. In fact, it's actually interesting. I mean, Jason Sad, who's like the IR head of IR at TeraWulf, he used to be at Marathon Digital, and he was one of the early ones that started putting out these monthly reports. So probably a thanks to Jason there for starting this. I know that the likes of Argo and Hive and Bitfarms and Riot were also very, very early in that stage there. I think there's about 4 or 5 miners. And what we've seen over these last few years is the quality of the updates that are coming out have just been improving. I mean, Bitdeer's update is very extensive. It goes through and talks about all their business areas. So it leaves you not really wanting more information. There's a lot of information there every month. And it's the same for other miners. We talked about the IREN update last week and how that's evolved over the years. I mean, some of these miners were literally writing 2 sentences. That was the update. How many bit mined? What's the hash rate? Did they sell any Bitcoin? Look forward to seeing you next month. End of. And some Argo actually, I'll give them credit where they do there. That their previous CEO, Peter Wall, used to come out and do a YouTube. He used to do what we're doing for Argo on a regular basis, and that's probably one of the reasons I stayed in the space as I have done now, because they were interesting, they were good, and he did Q&A sessions. I mean, there's a sort of like a limit to what you want to do as a public miner, because we've talked about this before. These miners tend to start playing one-upmanship on each other. As soon as one does something, 2 or 3 try and follow and do something even better. So it's great from our perspective, and it's great for your perspective as retail shareholders. But manage that expectation, because it was never always like this. I'm invested in other stocks, and I guarantee you that the banks or the oil companies, they don't give out updates like this every week. They don't come on the channel and talk to to retail shareholders. But we've been really fortunate. We've got Dan coming on tomorrow. We had Ben Gagnon last week. We had Mike Halford a few weeks ago. We've had some great interviews, and we're very, very lucky to have those people come on the show and answer some of your questions. So just manage expectation a little bit.
Most definitely. And using your train of thought there, Anthony, you always say CEOs are eager to put out information when times are good, but to manage expectations if and when things shift. That's very bullish for me, knowing that Dan Roberts is coming on the program the day after earnings. We haven't had Dan on in over a year now. So the fact that the co-CEO is coming on the very next morning after earnings report, got to be bullish, as you say there, Anthony. So we're looking forward to that one. Let us know if you have any questions in the comment section below, what you thought of Hive's Q3 results, and of course, Bitdeer's monthly production. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching.